Thank you very much. Question number 2. What specific examples of change would you recommend and why?
The Independence Institute spent the summer going through something called the Citizens Budget. It's available online at independenceinstitute.org, and you can download it from there. This contains a number of very, very specific suggestions about what we can do to, keep Colorado government down an even keel without raising taxes and without getting rid of Tabor, which would end up putting us in the same position that Illinois and California are in. You cannot tax your way out of a recession, and you don't tax your way to prosperity. First of all, the thing you have to remember is that most of government spending that people talk about is transfer payments. It's simply taking money from one person and giving money to another person. And that's usually what causes budget deficits, because obviously people like getting money from other people and they tend to vote for it. So some of the specifics that we think need to be addressed in Colorado is that the process needs to be addressed. We need to go and start, instead of just saying increases over previous year spending, we need to look at priority-based budgeting. We need to reevaluate who is getting enormous subsidies and why. For example, there's no particular reason why we should be running a children's basic health plan, which encourages 6 out of 10 people, based on national figures, to drop private insurance so that they can enroll their kid in a plan for $35 a year. If you're making an income of $35,000 a year with a child, you're eligible for S-CHIP. You can pay more than $35 a year, and in fact, in other states, the fees are more like $35 a month. As this points out, it's worth $18 million just to look at the fees for the Colorado Children's Health Plan. We can do a lot to reform public education. For starters, you can get rid of the master's bump for teachers, which costs about $140 million a year and has no demonstrated effect whatsoever on the performance of school children. We need to look at follow Douglas County, look at what happens if you can give tax credits to people who take their kids out of the public school system and send them elsewhere. It's much less expensive to school kids outside the public school system. For example, Catholic parochial schools around here charge about $6,000 a year for K through 8 education and about $10,000, a little more, $10,500 a year for high school education. The average spending per pupil in the suburban school districts is around $8,000 a year. They spend a lot more, and their spending doesn't include capital costs, which the Catholic school spending does. That's an example of the private sector showing that there is a much less expensive way to educate kids, and why don't the public schools look at that? In healthcare, it's pretty clear that the state programs, Colorado Basic Health Plan and Medicaid, pretty much cost about the same per capita as a private insurance plan, at least for kids. Last time I looked, Kaiser for a 10-year-old is about $2,100 a year for a child-only policy. S-CHIP is just under that at about $1,950. So there's a big difference here, and what we're seeing is that the public plans are not doing as well as the private sector plans, and the state should be asking why, rather than simply demanding that the taxpayers pay more. The other thing that we can look at is revision in the way the programs are structured and the kinds of incentives that they're given. The one program that Colorado was a pioneer in was consumer-directed attendance support for people on Medicaid who need attendance because they're so disabled. When they ran that program, they cut spending by 21% from the budgeted levels because they got to keep half and they got to hire their attendants as they saw fit. By giving them liberty, we saved money. The state is now dismantling that program and reinstituting bureaucratic controls on it, in part because it doesn't like the fact it can't set wages. There's a lot that can be done, and if you have the chance, I really urge you to take a look at this. Thank you.
From the perspective of the Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute, we also agree that there are limited areas where government interventions or government activities are appropriate. And in Colorado, we have one of the most limited governments of any state in the country. And we think that that is one of the reasons why it has been a huge struggle for Colorado to come out of the recession that we experienced in the early part of this decade, And as we're struggling to come out of this decade, or of this recession, more so than we're coming out more slowly than other states. And part of that is that there are certain foundational activities that the public sector, that we do communally, that benefit all of us and provide a platform not only for the business activity that we all depend upon, but also on the individual activity that we all value and know is really an important driver in our community. Specifically in Colorado, we believe, or from the Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute, we believe that it's wrong that we pay per $1,000 of income in taxes the second lowest tax rate in the country. We think that's a bad thing because what that means is our schools are not well funded. It means that our university system isn't well funded. It means that our transportation system doesn't provide the kinds of efficiencies and effectiveness that we need to make sure that we move people and goods from one place to the next. Now, the Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute's answer to this problem is to look at our tax system and figure out ways that we can make incremental changes. We aren't talking about becoming a big government state. We're not talking about taxing in the top 10%. How about just moving up the ladder a little bit so that we can invest sufficiently to make sure that we're attracting the best teachers possible, make sure that we're keeping our best students in Colorado here going to our universities. You know what? Right now, the state of Colorado provides no scholarship programs at all for our best and our brightest. So we do have a very limited needs-based scholarship program through state government, but we have none based on merit. Now, it's a great theory that we all individually can take care of ourselves. But the cost of a university education these days, whether it's public or private, whether it's in Colorado or Utah or Wyoming or California, is expensive. And that we genuinely believe that opportunity and the equality for opportunity is part of the role of the public sector. What we're suggesting from the Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute is that we revise our tax system to not only increase the amount of revenue that we generate, but also to make the process fairer. Currently, we have a single rate income tax. That means that no matter how much money you make, you pay the same percentage of your income in income tax. Now it's a value that feels really great to all of us here in the West, that we all have the same stake in the outcome. We all have the same stake. Regardless of how much you make, you pay 4.63%. There's nothing wrong with that, having that sense that we all pay the same stake. The problem is it ignores the fact that property taxes, which are another way that we generate revenue, primarily the way we generate revenue for schools, and sales tax, the other major component of the way that we pay for things like schools, healthcare, higher education, etc., are not based on income. And when you add property sales and income taxes together, we find that the lowest income among us pay the highest percentage of our income in taxes. In fact, it's about 9% for the bottom 20%. And some people may think that's okay, that we let the poorest pay the most among us, but some of us don't think that makes sense. We don't think that's really even the value system that Coloradans have. Why don't we even out the system so we all have approximately the same stake, so we're approximately paying the same amount? And what that would require is that we have a graduated income tax so that we tax folks that are at the higher end of the income scale at a slightly higher rate, so that when you add all the taxes together, we're all contributing approximately the same amount for supporting our community. Let me just add one other thing that's really important. We're all about efficient and effective government. We're all about a public sector that does the things that it needs to do as well as it possibly can. No one in this debate, as far as I can tell anywhere, is arguing for bad investments. The question is, what kind of communities do we want to live in? What kind of support do we want to provide to one another to make sure that everybody has the same access to the opportunities across the board, regardless of income, regardless of race, regardless of gender?
Now you get a little chance to comment. Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute, what is your assessment of the Independence Institute's suggestions? And then Independence Institute, What is your assessment of the Colorado fiscal policy suggestions?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I really appreciate the work that the Independence Institute does. I think that the work that they've done in producing the citizens' budget has really been an important contributor to this conversation and to this debate. You know, Linda and I may disagree about our approach and the way we see the role of the public sector, the way we see the role of individuals in the system. But I think we all agree that what we want to do it well. And I really appreciate the work that the Independence Institute has put into its proposal. And I, too, urge you to read the Citizens Budget. I don't know about you, but from the perspective of my perspective and the perspective of my organization, the Children's Basic Health Plan is essential to a functioning, to making sure that our kids can perform in schools, and that we believe it's just the right thing to do. It's a really efficient way to provide services to kids. We actually think that it's a good idea to have a basic children's health plan so that kids, regardless of their income, have access to health care, and regardless of whether or not their employer provides them with health insurance. It makes a heck of a lot more sense to us to do it that way than to mandating that employers have to provide, you know, everything, the mandates that we hear so much about. We think that we don't think it's a good idea to roll back the Children's Basic Health Plan. We think that having educated teachers, having teachers who are continuing their education so that they stay current with methods of whether it's new technology, it's new information, or it's new ways of teaching, we think people should be rewarded for educating themselves and being better teachers in classrooms. I love the idea that there's no research that shows. You know, that's one of those things that I try really hard not to say because I figure there's always some research somewhere that shows something. I think the investment that we make in individuals to help them be better at their jobs, and that we pay workers for their education, that's exactly what the public sector or the private sector does. I urge you to look closely at the recommendations in the Citizens Budget and decide whether or not that is the role that we play in supporting one another that's embodied in that document, whether that's the kind of Colorado you want, or whether you're looking for a slightly different Colorado, a Colorado where we all pay a little bit more. We're not talking about making it increasing taxes to the point that it becomes burdensome on people's ability to start businesses and raise their families. To suggest that in Colorado we're anywhere near that level is just something that's so beyond anything that I can imagine. We believe that we should do more to support one another. We believe that the Founding Fathers said that was the idea, is that there were certain places where the private economy cannot allocate goods and services effectively, and that there are more efficiencies that come from providing a public education system as opposed to a private education system. There's a lot of analysis that shows that private education is actually much more expensive than public, but I don't know that that's really the issue. At some level, there is real value, we believe, to a public education, where those of us who have differences of opinions come together and learn to live with one another, not by separating one another, but by learning together. And we believe that we can create, and that we have created, one of the strongest economies in the world based upon a strong, committed public education system that doesn't allow those who have the resources to buy good education get it, and everybody else ends up in public schools.